I've been doing a lot of work in global trade, but as an employee, right? And I did that for a long time. And then now, over the last 3 years, I've been doing it as a consultant in my own business, and actually providing a lot of services that will help along the global trade routes, especially when it comes to certification, right? You have all these different voluntary certifications. How do you interpret this certification soup, and what works for what market? So that's really the space that I'm in. But then more recently, I've decided to do something in a product area, drum roll, and I am launching a coffee brand called Revolutionary Coffee. So watch this space, and I'm really, really excited about that. There are these amazing opportunities on the continent, and whether you choose to take a hold of those opportunities goes back to what you also commented on, Anne, which is there a framework that allows you to engage in a way that you feel your risks are mitigated to a certain extent? Is there a way that there is the resources that you have, can they be pulled together to create the impact that they can have that goes just beyond your immediate family, who is the one receiving the remittances, right? So I think it goes back to what was said by one of the keynote guests today, that all of this really just begins with the kind of vision that you have for what it is that you wish to create. But going back to one of the part of the question that you had asked was, what is the role of the diaspora when it comes to trade? And you find that some of the things that are highly traded amongst diaspora community are specific to the diaspora, right? And the reason I'm saying this is because there are certain tastes that remind you of home, wherever home that is, wherever home is for you, right? I always like to say that home is where your heart beats best. So the geography doesn't really matter, but some of these tastes that were developed when you were growing up, you look for them because they have a certain memory for you. Like I said, I'm in the product space, so allow me to sort of stick to the product piece. But you find that even in the music that we enjoy, in the movies that we want to watch, right? The things that connect you back to where you grew up. But going back to the product, you also see that even in some of the products that people look for in these new places that they're living in, whether it's that certain taste of Kenyan tea that you like, whether it's Kenyan coffee that you enjoy, whether it's chevra from Kenya that you want. You could be living in India where they have chevra, which is this spicy snack. But they have a different type of mix to their spice, which is different from what you'll find in Kenya. Or you find that there's some green grams that we really like here at home. In Kenya, we call it dengu. They're exported, they're available all over the place. But when you're abroad, you look for it, especially if you're not in the global south. If you're in the global north, these are sort of the things that you look for in what they call the global supermarkets, right? So and that's the role that diaspora plays. It is in bringing in those tastes of home to the new place that is your home. And how can we encourage that trade? How can we get you to be our ambassadors for those tastes, for those different things that we like, whether it's the Ankara fabric, or whether it's again, going back to Kenyan tea, or whether it's Kenyan tea? How do we get you to open up another market for us, the producers who are here on the continent, in those spaces that you're in? So really, the diaspora are the ambassadors of the continent wherever they are, because they continue to connect to the continent. And in doing so, they create and open up a lot of different trade opportunities.
You're in business now, right? You just launched Revolution Coffee here on the African conference. Okay, don't say launch, but you mentioned it, which is great. So for you who has a product, you're on the continent, you want to take it global. how would you want the diaspora to engage with you so that you make sure that your product is in the shelf? How would you want them? How does that look like to you as a business person so that patients can get it into Europe, someone can get in the US? How does that look like? Because I totally believe, especially because of the beautiful coffee that you have, people need to taste Africa, right? I always say, especially
Absolutely.
Kenyan coffee, pure luxury, taste of luxury. How do we get it to the world so that we start changing this narrative? And then, as Joy was mentioning, get them to tour Kenya or Ethiopia or Tanzania, wherever coffee is grown, to actually go to the coffee farm. And, so then it also promotes tourism. So for you in business, how do you see that happening? Talk to the diaspora, they're listening. What do you want them to do to
Yay.
get you want business?
Well, I think that it goes back to what Patience was talking about. It's really just finding those businesses and those people who are that bridge, right?
Okay.
So that and it goes to also what was said in the previous panel about collaboration and about networking, because that's the only way that I'd be able to get my product out and to have it in homes across the world, right? And especially beginning with diaspora homes. I think that one of the reasons why I really wanted to launch my coffee and to have it at home first is because we have this tendency to think that the best is for export. And for me, it's really important that the best is also enjoyed at home. There's so many times, and I'm sure Patience, you've experienced this, Joy, I'm sure you've experienced this, or even those tourists that you were talking about, Joy. They come to you and they tell you, oh, but I tasted these mishiris, these green beans in Kenya, and they didn't taste like the way they taste when I buy them at Marks and Spencer, or when I buy them at Aldi or whatever. It's because we keep exporting the best, and we don't want to enjoy that best when we're here at home. So for me, my first thing with revolutionary coffee is it needs to be the same amazing coffee, whether you're having it in Nairobi or whether you're having it in, I don't know which city you're in, Joy, or whether you're in Rotterdam. It needs to be the same amazing coffee so that there is that consistency of product. And really that's where these linkages come in. It's how do we get that wonderful product to you, Joy, to sell in Germany? How do I link up with Patience who will show me how these linkages work, and how even the logistics end of things are able to take place. So to answer the short question, Anne, I think it goes back to collaboration, to networking, to that information that Joy talked about that is provided by the network. But also, I think more importantly, as a producer, it's to be able to put our best foot forward in whatever market that product is being sold in.
Okay, what is the major role for the diaspora when it comes to trade with Africa? And how do you think the diaspora can engage in global value chains? Because again, that's the issue, right? We are not part of these global value chains and build better relations in the countries that they have migrated to. So two things: how the global value chain question, and better relations based on them being in the diaspora and understanding those markets. Go ahead, Wangeci, let us know what you think.
Wow, two very broad questions, and challenging ones. But I do feel that with what you've put together with this conference, we have talked about it a little bit, which I think is a good thing. I think we had mentioned it in the previous panel. Kenneth Baddy spoke really clearly and articulately about the role that the diaspora can play when it comes to engaging with the governments where they are located. And I think that there is quite a lot to be said about that. And it goes back to my initial point about how the diaspora are ambassadors, whether they are willing to or not, or whether they are aware of it or not. They are the ambassadors for the continent. And even when it comes to trade, it's the same way. Which is why I think it's great that that Joy has started what she has started, that the panelists that we'll hear from later on today have already started, what they're doing, which is pooling resources together to find ways in which those pooled resources can have a bigger impact when it comes to the continent. I do think that we've also seen as a continent and even as the different countries, the power that the remittances have in our local economies. So going back to the point that you had made, Anne, if these could be directed or harnessed in a way that can create national impact. We've seen that happening with the sovereign bond in Rwanda. I think they've raised 2 different rounds where that money has been raised from Rwandan diaspora across Europe, where they've come in and they've invested in infrastructure at home. And it's done as a diaspora infrastructure bond. So you know that your remittance is not only coming home for consumption, but you have the opportunity to directly invest in your in your home. I guess you could call it your nationality government, and be able to have quite a wide impact because of that, because the resources are being pooled, but they're being pooled in a very strategic manner. So that would be one thing. And even for the diaspora that's out there, it's also challenging your home governments about what they're doing about it. The central banks across the continent, they have all of this data that shows the remittances that are there. So it's not that they are unaware of how much money is coming into the continent or into a specific country from the diaspora. It's how can this sort of be harnessed so that it makes sense for everybody. It makes sense for those who are sending in that money. There's an opportunity for return, but it also makes sense for the government that instead of going to borrow money from other foreign governments, why not tap into the human resource that is scattered across the globe and that is also willing, and there is that goodwill already that exists. So I think that there is certainly a role to play for the engagement that is required by diaspora with existing governments on the continent, but also even with the diaspora themselves, where they pool resources and they end up in networks like the one that Joy has put together, or where they tap into the knowledge that other diasporans have, like the way Patience has the information and the knowledge about bringing products and services to the European continent. She's taken the time to gather that information. She's taken the time to create those networks. She's taken the time to understand what the requirements are. And so it's a recognition that these are paid for services, but it's also a recognition that she straddles 2 worlds. And that is also the secret weapon that is the diaspora. You have an understanding of where these products are coming from, but you also have a very clear understanding about the market, and being able to act and continuing to act as that bridge remains a very, very key role for the diaspora to play.
Do your last remarks before we go on to the next speaker?
I would just continue to say, buy our wonderful stuff. Let us all taste Africa wherever we are. And let that be expressed in all the different things that you continue to do. And that is one of the biggest ways in which you can help other people on the continent grow their wealth, but also continue to do what it is that you're doing, which is acting as that bridge, knowing that you being straddled in both is not actually a drawback. It's a huge advantage. And I would urge the diaspora to continue to play that card, because it is a very big advantage. the understanding of multiple places and multiple economies is something that can certainly be leveraged. And so thank you again, Anne, for bringing us together and helping us to have these very critical conversations.